KBeach Radio is kbeach.org and KBeach FM 88.1 FM, KKJZ, HD3, Long Beach, Los Angeles. This is Rebirth of Rock. I'm your host, Jody Timmerman, and I've got a special treat tonight. I've got Lorenzo and Jay. They're going to be in the studio talking about their bands Jupiter and Max West, and this is part 3 in our series of kind of flashback shows of great music from the past in Long Beach. And this time we're going into the early 80s, which is going to be a treat. And we're going to actually start tonight off with the band Jupiter. And this is a tune called And You Know, and we'll let the guys get settled in, and we'll start the interview as soon as we get back. You're listening to Rebirth of Rock.
Said you didn't care till you became aware. You know they'd watch you on the street, something you couldn't beat. They were not very discreet, you know. And you know it doesn't matter which way you go. And you know wherever you go you'll be followed. You say it doesn't matter to me. Telephone, you knew you weren't alone, but no one said hello. You know you saw shadows on the walls and strangers in the halls stared like funny one-eyed dolls. You know, and you know it doesn't matter which way you go. And you know wherever you go you'll be followed. You say it doesn't matter to me. Nothing left to do, that's why they picked on you, you know. And you know it doesn't matter which way you go. And you know wherever you go you'll be followed. You say it doesn't matter to me. 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 Oh no.
You're hearing the future. This is KBeach Radio, and that was the band Jupiter with a tune called And You Know. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, we're really fortunate tonight to have Jay and Lorenzo from that band, Jupiter, and as well as their other band, Max West. And we're going to be talking a little bit about early 80s music scene here in Long Beach and LA, and should be quite a treat. So, you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Well, I'm Lorenzo.
I'm Jay Perris.
And thank you guys so much for coming in. This is a real treat for me. And I guess first, tell us a little bit about Jupiter, how the band came together, and kind of what you guys did in the early 80s, like how the band came together, what maybe kind of gigs you played around town, and maybe a little bit about the Long Beach music scene in those early days.
Well, the origination of Jupiter was in the mid-'70s, and it was me and the bass player, his name was Tim, and we were high school buddies, and we played in a few bands in high school, and then we decided to put another band together, and we called it Jupiter. And we were playing little things, anything from weddings to, middle schools and high schools and anything we could get. And then we were playing cover music, all cover music, and it was that kind of a scene. And at some point we'd gone through, I think, 3 drummers at some point, and said, you got to find another drummer. Another drummer that's gonna be last. So we posted things at music stores, because you used to post them in the music stores, these little posted things. And
Wallace, is that music?
Yeah, Wallace Music City. Yeah, something like that. These stores are, they have those poster boards. So Jay responds, and he calls us, and he says, "Hey, I'm interested." And so Tim and I we set up a date and went over there, and oh my God, I never saw anything like that. He was already playing with like 6 or 7 bands. He was,
Nice.
He had a lot more experience than we did.
Yeah.
And, we go in, we think we're the hot shots, and we see what he's got in there, and it's like this just wall to wall equipment, and it's like, oh my God, this guy's been around the block a few times. So, and I don't even know why he wanted to play with us.
So Jay, did you, so once you decided to join the band, were you still in other bands at the same time? Or?
I was in 6 bands at the time, and we're playing more like classic Southern rock, and
Yeah.
I knew music scene was changing, like Talking Heads would come in, all the new wave scene, and here are these young kids to me. They weren't that young, but they were kids to me, and I go, this is where it is. This is, so I dumped all my other bands, actually.
Just to focus on Jupiter. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
That's cool.
and he had to teach us timing.
How to end a song.
What's timing?
Oh, the old, I know the story about how to end the song. Yeah.
So it was really funny because like I said, he had a lot more experience than we did. So, and it just gelled, and we were playing top 40 still. And at that point, though, I was going to Cal State, so I had all these feelers out for parties that were going on with the fraternities. And,
Oh, sure, yeah.
And we started playing all those keggers and all those things, and a couple of times things got out of control, and because that's how those parties get sometimes. And one time we played for a fraternity that will remain nameless, and they got in trouble for all sorts of things going on in the neighborhood, and eventually they were put on probation.
Yeah. Still going on to this day. Yeah, that's crazy.
So another one, they didn't realize that they could end up with more people than they anticipated.
Yeah.
And at one point they had like about 1,500 people show up to their house. They called the cops on themselves.
Yeah, that's a little more than you expect. Yeah. That's crazy. So you guys have a somewhat of a strong tie to the university here at Long Beach State. I know that you had mentioned in the bio, and also just to me a few minutes ago, that you guys had played here quite a bit on campus, correct?
Yeah, well, we played twice in a big setting, which was over in front of it used to have a stage in front of the bookstore.
Oh yeah, I recall that.
Yeah, in the quad area there, and they used to have bands at noon, and somehow, some way, I managed to swing a deal with KSUL, which was the radio station of the school at the time, student-run radio station. It was really cool, and they liked our stuff, and they were really supportive of us, and so they sponsored us, because you have to have a sponsor on campus in order to play on campus.
Oh, nice.
So, and they sponsored us the first event, and we got a good response on that one. And then I don't know, about maybe a year later, we did it again. And it was like my thing. I really wanted to play here. It was because I was going here.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Yeah. So, and then, ironically, the 49er. Okay.
The local, the school newspaper, yeah.
So I'm out in front most of the time because I was the lead singer, and I was a guitar player. Jay's behind the drums most of the time.
Sure.
Okay. Well, Jay had one song that he used to sing, so he'd come out front. Well, Jay's antics, because, he used to do all sorts of bizarre stuff up there. So next morning, after we'd played here the first time, I rush here to get the 49er to see if we were in the paper, right? And who's on the front page? Jay. Just Jay.
I sense a little trouble in paradise. Huh?
If you would have saw the picture that they drew, like clown hair on my face, and
nice.
Yeah.
So,
oh my gosh.
Second time we played here, Tim and I decided we were not going to let him get away. So during his whole time out front, we ran next to him wherever he went. We were with him.
just to prevent that from happening
so we'd
again.
be in the picture too,
and we were.
Yeah. So the next time around, we were all in the picture. So
that's crazy. That's crazy.
But that was pretty funny.
Sounds good. Well, I'll tell you what. I think we're going to go ahead and play another song here from Jupiter. This one is called Call of the Wild. Anything you want to say about the song before we play it?
Yeah, it's a relationship song. It's all about two completely different people and personalities that they're attracted to each other, but for whatever reason, it's not going to quite work out.
Okay, so we're going to play this now. What year is this from, guys?
1980. This was on our first album, which was multiple choice. I think this is the third song in.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, you're listening to Rebirth of Rock, and this is Jupiter with Call of the Wild. This is KBeach Radio, 88.1 FM, HD3, and KBeach.org. And you just heard Call of the Wild by the band Jupiter. And we're fortunate enough to have Jay and Lorenzo from that band here in the studio with us. And before the break, we were kind of talking about how Jupiter came together. I wanted to maybe touch on your guys' influence a little bit, because I hear a lot of things in the music. I hear a little bit, obviously, of kind of like Brit pop, I guess, and then I hear a little bit of punk. The last song sounded a little early punk to me. So tell us a little bit about your influences and kind of how that sound came together.
Well, personally, I'm a child of the '60s in terms of what I heard. My sister was several years older than me, and she was a teenager when I was a little kid, and that's what I heard. I grew up with that. So a lot of the music that influenced me was from the '60s. And then, of course, I was in high school during the '70s, which was the progressive period.
Sure.
Everything is progressive, and it's like, look what we can do. So we had a lot of sophistication in the '70s. And then it all came back around, because for every action, there's a reaction.
Yeah.
So the reaction was punk.
Sure.
So
yeah.
punk grew out of the '70s. Well, we had a knack for sounding like punks, because that's what we sounded like just naturally. So we tried to be a little more sophisticated, but no matter what we did, it always had a punk feel to it.
Yeah.
So that song in particular, that one is it's kind of based on influence from the Who, and then we got Cream in there, and we got it was this big sound, but we were also listening to a lot of Ramones.
Oh yeah,
so,
I could hear that too. Definitely. And then what about you, Jay?
Well, I came from liking Ginger Baker from the Cream.
Oh, sure.
That was my, and then Keith Moon. But when you're a three-piece band, you're a punk band. I don't care who you think you're.
Yeah.
You're either playing blues or you're a punk band. Yeah. There really isn't much difference when you're a three-piece band. I think that's why Green Day nowadays sometimes sounds like the early stuff that we used to do. Not just stuff we recorded, but just everything that any band did at that time period.
Yeah, I could see that, yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about some of the venues that you guys played here, particularly here in Long Beach, but you can kind of expand on it a little bit and tell us a little bit about LA and during that time period too. We're really curious about how you guys booked the gigs, if you had any really memorable gigs, maybe if you opened for anybody like a big national touring act or anything like that.
Well, in Long Beach, we had the main places here when we were playing was the Hard Rock Saloon. Was one of the places which is now Alex's Bar.
Really?
Yeah, but it was called the Hard Rock Saloon, and it was a biker bar, and it was a hardcore biker bar back then.
I had no idea.
So, and we were still playing covers at that time, and we were sneaking in some of our originals, but nobody was interested in the originals. All they really wanted to hear there was Born to Be Wild, and we had to play Born to Be Wild like 4 or 5 times a night sometimes, and if we didn't play it, they'd be very angry. The customers were very intimidating to us. So, and more than a couple of times, we satisfied them thoroughly saturated them with Born to Be Wild. One night, a man who was quite inebriated came up to me after the show with a big old pitcher, and he says, "You guys played Born to Be Wild for me. I'm going to sit down and drink this pitcher with you." And I told him, "Well, I don't really drink." He says, "What, you tell me you ain't going to drink with me?" I said, "Oh, no, I'll drink with you."
No, I'm cool. It's all good.
So, yeah, and fights in the parking lot were not unusual.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. So I know you had mentioned before too that you played a lot of kind of the hot spots in LA, the real well-known places up in LA as well.
Yeah, the main places that we played were we played Gazzari's a lot. Sometimes we booked the shows ourselves, and sometimes we got them through KROQ, because we were working hard trying to get KROQ to play our stuff, and we were getting very familiar. We were becoming very familiar faces in their hallways up there, because anybody could walk in at that time over there. There was no security. You could just walk right in and talk to the DJ.
That's crazy.
And we were pestering. His name was Insane Daryl Wayne.
Good DJ name. I need something like that.
So we were pestering him around the clock to play our stuff, and his hands were tied because he could only play so much. Actually, he was very tied. He only had DJ's choice twice in an hour, and usually everything else was going overtime, so his DJ's choice usually got sacrificed.
Oh, I see.
Eventually we got put into their regular playlist, but that took some doing. But we did a lot of stuff with them up at Gazzari's because they used to do a lot of shows at Gazzari's at that time. Matter of fact, we did their Halloween show, which they kept calling it the Halloweeny show, which ultimately became Weenie Roast.
Weenie Roast, oh, makes sense.
So it was kind of interesting how that all morphed over time.
That's a big. At the time, was it? I mean, obviously, it wasn't as big of a a big power station as it is now. Where was it just kind of just beginning? Was the format a little bit more open at that point?
Well, at that time they'd been in the 70s. They were a typical classic rock type station. Just like KLOS and KMET, and then they started to venture out into more edgy territory.
X. They were like only ones playing X, I think, at the time.
Oh wow!
And then they started playing all these punk bands, and they started having a lot of the new wave bands. And then suddenly KROQ skyrocketed, went to #1 with hardly any power in their area, and suddenly they're #1 because they're breaking all the new material because LA was the hotbed for all the new material, and you couldn't spit without hitting a band that may be up and coming. I mean, that's literally how it was. So, and then we used to play at the Troubadour. The Troubadour was an interesting place because they actually had a sound system, their own sound systems. We didn't have to bring a sound system, and it was a good one.
Nice.
So it was a lot less stress for us. And KROQ was promoting our stuff. However, initially, our audiences were small at the Troubadour. But then when they finally started promoting us the way that we'd hoped they would, and working us into the playlist, we actually sold out the Troubadour once, and that was kind of cool.
That's fantastic.
And
what were they playing? What song of yours were they playing?
Well, at that time we were promoting Rock and Roll Is Here to Stay, which was the anti-disco song, because, like I said, for every action there's a reaction in the business, and disco had become such a phenomenon in the late 70s that nobody could get work. The bands. Oh yeah. Because everybody wanted to hear DJs. So we when it started to fade out, I came up with this idea. Hey, let's write this song. All about killing disco, finishing it off once and for all. And then we worked in theatrics at some point. And next thing we know, we had the Jupiter Kill Disco show, which was pretty funny. And
was it up there in LA as well?
It was at Gazzari's. We were actually the first live music after disco at Gazzari's.
Wow, that's in Gazzari's. If I'm not mistaken, it's still there, no?
Turned into the Key Club.
Oh, the Key Club. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's closed.
Because I think Gazzari's was real big in the '80s metal scene too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. So and Gazzari's was really cool because they had 4 stages, which you don't have any place that has 4 stages anymore. And they used to take chances with bands. So I mean, we came out there, we did the Kill Disco show. Starts out, there's a disco music's playing. I think we're using Ring My Bell, and we had a friend of ours named Mike who was dressed up like a disco dancer in his white suit and would go out there and just start gyrating and doing his whole thing out there. I'd come on stage and I'd hit some chords on my guitar really loud, and he'd start spasming out there, and then Jay and Tim would rush him out on the dance floor and do him, pretend they were beating him up on the floor in front of everybody.
The Walking Dead.
Yeah, really. And nice. we had a steak sewn into his shirt so that you could rip his shirt open, and there was a raw steak in there, and they'd pull it out and look like guts, and Tim would eat it in front of everybody. And it was the first few times it was really, it caught everybody by surprise. And are you guys really doing that? That's really
like some kind of Alice Cooper thing.
Yeah, it was pretty bizarre. And one time we did that at a club called Club 88, and somebody had left the back door open, and a dog that had just given birth, it was sagging, had come in, and Mike is laying on the floor with his guts, his entrails sticking out. The dog looked like the dog from Disneyland in the Haunted Mansion, that skinny dog. Yeah. Walks over there and just starts eating the steak out of his belly. And we didn't get any pictures.
That's insane.
We couldn't have cued a dog to do that better.
That's crazy. Well, I tell you what, I actually have queued up the song that killed disco, Rock and Roll Is Here to Stay. Is there anything else you want to say about this before I play it?
No, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Is it kind of like your rock and roll all night, party every day, like your theme song? Kinda
Yeah,
like kids?
well, yeah, it turned out to be that because it was the song that was very accessible at the time, and it seemed to be very, very relevant at that time too. So
okay, well, let's give it a listen. This is Jupiter with "Rock and Roll Is Here to Stay." You're listening to Rebirth of Rock. This is KBeach Radio, 88.1 FM, HD3, and KBeach.org. This is Rebirth of Rock. I'm your host, Jody Timmerman, and have the great pleasure of having Jay and Lorenzo from the band Jupiter here in the studio with me. And before the break, we were talking a little bit about the venues that they had played around town and here in Long Beach and also Los Angeles. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the show that you guys did out in the desert, like the trouble that you ran into trying to do a festival here in town or a big music show, and the great lengths that you went to actually pull this off out in the desert. So tell us a little bit about the trouble that you had getting permitted or whatever it was, and maybe we can talk a little bit from there. We can talk at the end a little bit about maybe how things have changed here in town a little bit. So just tell us what it was like trying to get that off the ground.
Well, Long Beach has several parks, and they have band shells and stages. So I live near El Dorado, and they had built a really nice stage in El Dorado Park back in the 70s, and it was really cool. And I thought, wow, that'd be a great place to have a concert. So I approached the city, and I said, can I get a permit for this? Well, next thing I know, they're starting to give me these numbers about how much this was going to cost. And the numbers kept getting bigger. And it got to the point where, you know what, they really don't want us to do this.
Yeah.
Because that shell in El Dorado had gone pretty much unused.
Still to this day.
To this day, yeah. I mean, they have it. They use it for little parties. They'll use it for like children's sports. They'll have like a ceremony over there or something. And,
sure.
And every once in a while, they might have some little show over there. But the stage has so much more potential. That whole section over there does. But they've always treated it very I don't know, with kid gloves. They don't really want to use it. So I tried to do, tried to get them to give me a permit for it, and we had all sorts. We tried to jump through all the hoops, but there just was no way to satisfy it because every time we jumped through a hoop, they'd come up with some new requirement. So it became obvious that it wasn't going to happen. So at some point, Jay and some friends of his, hey, we could do this. We could do this out in the desert. So they had some friends that lived out near Hemet. And at that time, Hemet was even smaller than it is now. So, and I think it was even hotter than it is now.
Yeah.
So
that's possible. Yeah.
And they arranged to have, we had 3 or 4 bands that came with us, and a couple of them were from Long Beach. One was called Balz, BALZ. And man, they had so much equipment that was really cool. So we really banked on them coming to this event because we needed that equipment. Plus, they were really good guys too, and they used to get us. They used to help us get jobs. They'd say, "Hey, you could go play over here, go play over there."
What kind of was it, like a metal band? I know a lot of times metal bands use Z's at the end of their name.
Yeah, they were kind of on the metal edge, but they were metally. But we got along really well with them, and so we had, we were swapping out equipment and stuff with them all the time. So anyway, Jay sets this thing up with its other friends, and next thing we know, they're out there building a stage, and out in the middle of nowhere.
Wow!
So I mean, literally,
I've seen the photos. This is a true story, by the way. Yeah.
This festival, we'd get these directions. Okay, you're going to drive X amount of miles, to Riverside. Get off at such and such street. Take the Ramona Expressway to where it turns into town. Follow this street until it ends and turns into a gravel road. Follow the gravel road. We're going to put markers on the bushes.
Nice.
Right?
And the thing is, on the flyer, it always had to say on the bottom, a private party, even though it wasn't.
Why is that?
So that police wouldn't think it's an open event.
I see what you're saying. So you're tricking the cops. Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So, but it was so remote that, there were no patrols out there. After you drive another hour after the gravel road into the desert, nobody cares anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
But it lasted 3 days.
Wow. So it was a true DIY music festival. Did you have a lot of people out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting because people would just show up. People that we knew, people we didn't know. And next thing you know, word of mouth, people would spread. And but it's funny because we really didn't have lighting, so it was all a daytime event mostly. So and that nighttime it was a little bit. It wasn't quite as, it wasn't like a big festival because we couldn't afford that. We couldn't do that kind of stuff. But we did manage to get some shows out there, and it was really neat because nobody bothered us.
How'd you guys get power?
Generators.
Wow.
We actually tapped into the power lines.
Really?
Yeah.
You didn't tell them that?
That's Jay speaking, by the way.
I knew nothing of it.
He still doesn't know nothing about it.
Well, actually, I was the diva, so I didn't show up until after the stage was built.
Nice. And how many bands played that 3-day weekend? Was it just the two of you?
Oh no, there was.
We'd have like 3 bands a day.
Yeah.
And sometimes
solo people.
Yeah, a lot of singer songwriters and a lot of just players. It was really cool. It was truly a casual festival, and since everybody was kind of know each other, it was really cool. They behaved.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. That's incredible. I don't think I've ever heard a story about anybody doing a do-it-yourself music festival. So
Behaved.
I have a feeling there's more to the story. I don't know why, but
we didn't have porta potties.
We had 3 of them.
Oh, yeah.
We had 3. Well, we had to actually dig the outhouses.
Latrines.
We dug about 3 of them.
This is taking a weird turn.
Well, you have to have facilities.
That's true.
And they had a snack shop.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, I tell you what, I've got another tune queued up. This one is another tune from Jupiter called Megalomania. Anything you want to tell us about this song?
Well, this is a leftover from the 60s almost. A lot of 60s influence in this. I was in high school just as the Vietnam War ended. Jay was in high school. Jay was out of high school and was in jeopardy of being drafted a lot of times. So for us, that was still fresh in our minds.
Oh, yeah.
And all of this stuff and the whole peace movement and all that. So this song is basically about how we've we've come so far, yet we haven't.
Right.
So it's a little gloomy.
Gotcha. That's okay. Well, let's take a listen. This is Megalomania, and this is the band Jupiter. You're listening to Rebirth of Rock.
Fade into a sorrow of tears, a whisper of echoes from a drain from sounds we now hear. Sounds of laughter, sounds of sadness, sounds of rapture, sounds of madness. Even through the glooms, I'm past the ranks of people being killed and maimed like guns, bombs, and tanks. To the anger and the fire, the anguish and desire, the torture and the terror are brought on by human error. Sense of danger in the cold, hiding in mystery. School children choking in the smog, the technicality of a new history. False motives, fantastic progress, not even a loss of culture greed. A world complicated and full of stress. I ask only, what have we achieved? Sense of danger in the fog, sound hiding in mystery, sound school children choking in the smog, sound technicality of a new mystery.
This is KBeach Radio, 88.1 FM, HD3, and KBeach.org, and that was Megalomania by the band Jupiter. And I'm lucky enough to have two of the members here in the studio with me, Jay and Lorenzo, and we've been talking a little bit about their DIY music festival out in the desert, and I think we're going to transition a little bit into your second band, which is Max West. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, the demise of Jupiter and the kind of rebirth into a new band. Tell us about that.
Well, what happened was we had finished Multiple Choice, and we had been promoting it, and we started working on our second album. The second album we were funding ourselves. The three of us were funding it ourselves. There was nobody backing this one, like the first one. So, this really put a lot of stress on us.
Sure, yeah, you get to come up with the funds. Yeah.
So, we were booked into a very expensive studio, and it was the studio that was used by all the major companies. And in Santa Monica, it was called Dalton Recorders. And this was a state-of-the-art studio. The first album was done at 16-track. This is the Jupiter, the Max West stuff was actually done on 24-track and state-of-the-art at that time. And anyway, the pressure was building up, and then personal commitments start to come up, and we ended up having a situation where our bass player had to become more responsible for several things, and
yeah, I understand.
He needed to bow out of the project. At the time, it was a little heated because we were in the middle of this thing, but all in all, it was okay. It's the way it was supposed to be, and it's fine. We're all we're all on good terms these days.
That's good.
But at the time, it was a little heated. So after he bowed out, Jay and I actually finished it on our own. Well, we didn't finish it. We continued on our own, but then we started to run out of money, and this studio that was costing us a ton, and we were using it after hours, like after midnight.
So you're getting a good deal anyway.
So we get the rate.
Yeah.
And it was just going on and on and on, and it was costing. The cost was starting to add up.
Fleetwood Mac was in there in the daytime recording.
Is this true?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
so
amazing.
I mean, we were using the studio, and it was also the same studio they used to mix Star Trek movies. It was running the
The running one, where the heart would.
I don't remember that.
Silent running.
Oh, silent
running.
So I mean, they were doing high end stuff for the studio. So this, us being in there, it was like, yeah, you guys can use it, but it's really not that important to us.
Right.
So anyway, our engineer, who was a freelancer actually, but he worked in that studio a lot, and he knew all the studios. He says, maybe I can find something for you. So we had stuff to finish, and he knew we wanted to finish it. So he says, I know this really, really good deal. So he got us a deal on using Emmylou Harris's mobile traveling recording studio.
Wow.
This was the recording studio. It's on, it's a semi-truck. And state of the art. I mean, it was even more state of the art than this studio we were in.
That's amazing.
And this is a traveling studio. He says, you can use that. He says, it's parked behind her real studio. So you come in at midnight and we can record in there. So we go in there, and the sound booth was so tiny, you could barely fit the drums in there.
Wow.
So Jay was doing drums in the sound booth. I was doing guitar going direct and listening through headphones. And actually, it was an amazing sound that we got in there. It was the tightest we'd ever been. And it was because of this really hard, tight situation.
Yeah.
And so we did a couple more tracks in there, but then eventually we just decided, you know what, we're not going to be able to do a full album right now. So we released four songs on a 45 EP,
which I have right here.
So and it was unusual at the time to have 4 songs on a 45, because the 45 is only 7 inches.
Yeah.
And it's really small, so they had to cut those grooves really shallow. So anyway,
crazy. So we actually have. I'm assuming this is one of the songs that you recorded in the mobile studio, right? Is this?
This is one of the ones we finished in that
you
studio.
Finished, yeah.
And it's called The Sound.
Okay, so we're going to give this a listen. Again, this is called The Sound from Max West. Who was playing bass on this? Did you have
I just went in and we removed all the bass tracks that we had put down as Jupiter, and I just put in new bass tracks under Max West. Eventually, we got a new bass player who was a different type of bass player and played the style that I was actually playing in, which was a more relaxed style and less frenetic, which Jupiter was very frenetic and exciting, whereas this was a more mellow sound.
Gotcha. Okay, well, let's give this a listen. This is pretty good stuff. This is The Sound by the band Max West. You're listening to Rebirth of Rock.
La 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 la
You're hearing the future. This is KBeach Radio, and you just heard the song "The Sound" from the band Max West. And again, I have Jay and Lorenzo here in the studio from that band, and also from the previous band that we were playing, which is Jupiter. And we were talking a little bit about the transition from Jupiter to Max West, and in between the song breaks, we were actually talking about a couple of things. I wanted to ask you guys, first of all, about how you distributed the Jupiter record and this record, and then I want someone to touch on the story about the US Festival, because that's incredible. I can't believe we hadn't talked about it yet. So,
well, what happened with the distribution was radio stations wouldn't play our stuff, and their reason was you don't have distribution. It has to be in the stores if we're going to play it. Well, the stores kept saying, well, if you don't have it on the radio, we're not going to take it. Well, that left us in a little bit of a bind here, so we couldn't get the major chains to carry the record. That was the multiple choice album. So what ended up happening on that was we start working on the independent record stores, and we started all the way down at the southernmost part of Orange County, and we just started working our way up north, and we got it into 40 record stores. From Orange County to the San Fernando Valley, and then we also and Long Beach had an independent that was really hot at the time. It was called Zed Records.
Oh, I know Zed.
And,
Zed was still here when I moved here. It's a great store.
And one of the biggest ego trips that a person can have in a band is when they stick your album out there and it's got the same divider as the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and it's got that little white divider thing, and your name is on there. And
it must be really cool.
So, and the first store that we actually got it into, though, was the Tower Records in Hollywood, which was, even though it was Tower Records, it was an independent Tower Records. It wasn't stuck in the same hamstring. It wasn't hamstrung like the rest of the corporate ones. So they would take everything that was new because they wanted to be on the cutting edge of everything.
Oh, yeah, that was a great store.
So, and we got it in there, and then they said, well, Tower will take your record if you get a vendor number. And they gave me the number to call, and I talked to the purchasing lady up there, and she says, okay, so I'll give you a vendor number. You can walk into the stores and just leave them. So we distributed it to all the towers in the areas too. So we had it in selected, what was it, Tower Records and selected record stores everywhere.
Wow. So this is what wasn't really a consignment. This was an actual.
To Tower, it was. It would have been an actual purchase.
Wow.
Whereas the other ones were all in consignment, and and then at some point I just lost. Jay and I were the ones that were doing all the footwork on that.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
And it started to take its toll because we're trying to perform, we're trying to have regular jobs during the day because you had to support ourselves.
Yeah, sure.
And then on top of that, we took on this new task of being record distributors, and just the sheer mental energy that had to be spent on that, trying to cajole people into taking a record in. So eventually it ended up in bargain bin over at Zed. We saw it there for 99 cents.
Yeah.
And now it's worth, to record collectors, it last went for $250 on the world market, which is kind of cool to see that. So even though we don't have any to really distribute anymore.
and we're actually on the Devotee album from KROQ. If anybody ever sees that, the people who did Devo songs.
Yeah, their unique style of Devo songs.
Really? What year was that released?
80.
Yeah, in 1980 or 81.
So you guys covered a Devo song?
We did Mongoloid. Our version, which was very, very different than their version. And actually, Devo selected the songs that they wanted on this album. It was done through that record company, Rhino Records.
Oh, that's fascinating.
We got some royalties off of that. Didn't go very far, but it was nice to get the royalties.
Are you guys? Can you say? Are you fans of the band?
Devo? Oh yeah,
I love Devo.
Yeah, we were tinkering around with their songs, and one day it just morphed into this other song, and it was kind of interesting. So they said, "Hey, send your song in, and maybe you could be on the Devotees album." So we sent it in, and sure enough, that's
really cool.
So,
well, I think Jay was going to tell us a little bit about the possibility or the near experience of playing the US Festival. So tell us a little bit about that. I'm fascinated by that story.
Yeah, when we were recording at Dalton Studios, the engineer that was working with us knew the people that were putting on the US Festival, and they came out and they were considering us to open. They wanted to bring some new talent in, at the very last moment, actually, they put in what's his name?
It is Little Steven.
Yeah, his band actually opened, and I actually went to the US Festival and I got to see him play.
What day? Obviously, that wasn't the metal day or the new wave day. Was it just the rock day? Is what you were being considered? Because I know, I at the time I was really into metal, so I recall that's an incredible day of music for metal. But I do remember there being kind of like an alternative MTV, KROQ type of day, and then I thought that there was just kind of like a straight ahead rock stage as well.
It seems like this was the very first one, and it seemed like there was like David Bowie, Stevie Nicks, Joe Walsh.
Wow.
That whole type of group. And there was the other one with Boingo and Stray Cats. And,
that's what I was thinking of. Kind of like the early MTV days. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's incredible. Well,
we were this close. We were
that close.
Could have been a contender.
And he really needed to be promoted, you know.
But those videos of the US Festival are still floating around to this day on YouTube. You can catch all those shows, and
well, Jay was a spectator in it.
Yeah, maybe we can watch him and see if we can see you in the crowd. What was that experience? Was that fun?
Oh, it was great.
Yeah,
great time.
Yeah,
I went to all 3 days. Camped out.
That's awesome. Well, we have time to play another song from Max West if you want to. I have Friends.
Put Friends on. Friends was 100% done in the mobile recording studio.
Okay.
And that one is really tight. The bass and the drum, the bass and the kick are just right on the whole time.
Okay, sounds good. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick song break here. This is Friends by the band Max West. You're listening to Rebirth of Rock.
Phone
This is KBeach Radio, 88.1 FM, HD3, and KBeach.org, and you just heard Friends by the band Max West. First of all, I want to thank you guys for coming in today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I'm going to just give you a couple of upcoming dates for the Jay Lorenzo show, or Jay and Lorenzo. March 21st, they're going to be at Rebel Bite here in Long Beach, down in the East Village. March 28th, they're going to be at the Corner Store in San Pedro. March 28th, Lorenzo's going to be at the Red Barrel over here in East Long Beach. And March 31st, Jupiter Night at Von Rischer's open mic at Rebel Bite at 1980s LA music scene. And Lorenzo's going to take us out with a live tune here. Thanks for tuning in tonight.
Thank you very much, Jody.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Listen to the cues and the clues in this song. How can it be right? How can it be wrong? And the things that I think, do, and say, past, present, future, yesterday, and today. And did I just say what the out loud? I'm so disgusted, I'm surely not proud. You don't know me, that's absurd. You can't show me where in the verse. You don't know me, just look in the mirror. You can't show me the elusive words. The elusive words. The multi says it all takes place at once, and that time is human, a human construct. Veils blur these things I almost see, all spokes of some elaborate scheme. And there is beauty in the white noise as chaos masquerades as freedom of choice. You don't know me, that's absurd. You can't show me where in the verse. You don't know me, just look in the mirror. You can't show me the elusive words. The elusive words. On the tip of my tongue, I just can't explain. So much I've left undone. It's nailed to my brain. Nailed to my brain.